Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to be speaking live with Dave Graham from the Dave G Investing channel. And I found your channel because I recently became very interested in a space company called Rocket Lab. And you make awesome Rocket Lab content. And yeah, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your investment strategy?
Sure. Yeah. So, my name's Dave. I have a small YouTube channel talking a lot about space companies. I got interested in investing from a pretty young age. My parents kind of got me interested, especially my mother, and kind of actually bought my first investments for me and would tell me like, "Oh, it's gone up" and stuff like that, and it would get me excited about it. So I've been into it for a long time. Not only in space companies, but I've gotten more interested in them lately over the past year or so. And with the YouTube channel, that's definitely also what my viewers seem to be interested in. So it's, partly, I like space companies, but also that's kind of the niche I'm in. I do still hold a bunch of other companies outside the space industry, though. I do have Tesla, some ETFs and safer companies. I used to have a lot of other different tech stocks as well. I still do hold some tech stocks. Obviously, I have a decent sized position in Rocket Lab, small position in Planet Labs as well. And that's about it for me.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this introduction. The reason why I was so looking forward to this interview is because I have been doing a lot of videos about a company. That's how I started my YouTube channel called Palantir. And I really enjoyed making content about Palantir because the stock price kept going down. And I, felt like I saw something in this company. And then I felt like I was helping the community by, making these videos. And then, ChatGPT came along and the price really blew up. And I feel that, it's very mainstream now. And yeah, I do still follow Palantir and, cover the news, but I don't feel the same enthusiasm as when I started covering Palantir.
Oh, okay.
And,
yeah.
And
I did have a position in Palantir briefly. Well, for a little while. I did sell it at one point, but yeah, it's interesting.
Very curious. How much did you buy that at when, and when did you sell?
Oh gosh, it was a smaller position, so I don't remember the exact numbers. I did sell, I want to say a few months ago. So I did make money on it, but I just felt I'm not enough of an expert in the company. I'm not saying it's a bad company, but it's just not something I'm that knowledgeable about. And I tried to kind of reduce the number of companies I was holding and make sure that I know a lot about the ones I do hold. So Palantir was kind of one of the casualties of that. But I would be open to buying it again if I, had the time to really dive deep on it and found that it was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I like you already because I also believe in this that, invest in what you know. And I actually, you're going to think I'm stupid, but when I invested into Palantir, I almost went 100% of my portfolio into Palantir. And that's not, it's not as crazy as you think. It's because I thought I had more money coming into the stock market. And then I wanted to make that position as one of like 10 positions. And then, so I like at that time, that was the company that I felt comfortable as one position. So, like I bought as one position, but then I didn't end up getting more money out to the stock market. So it became 100% of the, or I have Tesla and Palantir, but yeah, it's like 80.
I wouldn't say that's crazy. I would say you definitely have a high conviction in that case. Concentration can be a good way of growing your capital, whereas diversification really can protect it. So, a lot of people who became millionaires and stuff like that went in 100% on Tesla and companies like that. So yeah, I wouldn't, say that's stupid or anything. It's just a different philosophy.
Yeah, cool. And so basically in researching space, I found this company called Rocket Lab. And when I first saw Rocket Lab, it was many, many years ago, and I thought that this company was a joke. And I was thinking, I saw this video that they're trying to build the Electron rocket, and I was thinking, yeah, why even bother with this? Like SpaceX is doing this already, and I was like, okay, this is a cute effort, and they will soon be bankrupt.
Right.
And I don't know how, like a few months ago, I started hearing about this company, and my reaction was like, what? They're still alive? Okay, they must be very, very close to bankruptcy now.
Yeah.
And then I started researching the company. That's how I saw your videos, and I was actually shocked how freaking good they're doing. I'm completely mind blown by Peter Beck. I mean, you know how Astra was the stealth rocket company. I call Rocket Lab the impossible rocket company, because like logically it should not have been possible what Peter Beck managed to do
Yeah.
with that company.
Wild history.
Yeah, I mean, to open a rocket company in a country that has no aerospace industry, no talent to tap into, and no funding. Other than that, it was good. Oh yeah, and to fly his first rocket, he had to like change the laws of his own country and make his
Yeah.
country make treaties with the U.S. and open its own space agency. So,
Yeah.
but other than that, it was a walk in the park.
Other than that, yeah.
Yeah. No money, no staff, and yeah,
No problem. Yeah.
exactly. So as we have been tweeting at each other a little bit, and I saw your videos, we both have read Ashley Vance's When the Heavens Went on Sale book, which I think is a must read for anyone who is thinking about investing in the space stocks. And this, because I want to give my channel viewers a sort of an overview of like what's happening in space, and I feel that this book actually covers 4 companies, and maybe we could just touch on these 4 companies, and
Yeah, sure.
then we could speak about more about Rocket Lab, because that's the one that we both are the most bullish on. Cool. So the first company in the book was Planet Labs, and you even mentioned that you're a shareholder in that company. So I've done very little research about the company. Could you give me like an elevator pitch, and how are they doing? Are they bankrupt? Are they burning money? Are they going to make it?
Yeah, so Planet Labs, interestingly, has a longer cash runway than Rocket Lab does, actually. They have slightly less cash on their balance sheet, but they are burning slower than Rocket Lab. So theoretically, they could last longer on the current, capital balance. What they basically do is they want to be like the Google of Earth observation. And they build out these satellites. They can be very small because with miniaturization of technology, even phone cameras are getting so impressive. They realize you don't need to build these massive billion-dollar satellites anymore and send them into orbit. You could have very small, very cheap satellites. So they can image the entire Earth every day, and not as high resolution as some other like really expensive satellites, but you could go look at a location, see how it was yesterday, the day before that, and just really see how things change. And there's a lot of uses for that data. Various governments, various private companies, a lot of agriculture and things like that. And obviously with the conflict in Ukraine, they've gotten a lot of press showing that you've seen Planet Labs pictures saying like, here's, Russian stuff or whatever. They're just trying to grow their Earth observation network, basically.
Cool. And what do you think is the potential? Because I like to very much invest in the long term. So what do you think the end goal, like if this company was mature, like what do you think is their revenue per year? What is the profit percentage? Yeah.
So that's why my position in Planet Labs is quite small, because I wanted to go through and make a spreadsheet with, all those details, and I haven't done it yet. And I just sort of bought it as a way to like, okay, this is one you got to keep track of and eventually dig deeper on. So I haven't done like the full I guess, analysis that I would have with a larger position. But I have been tracking the revenue growth, and it does look like they should be able to reach profitability well before they run out of capital, unlike a lot of these other new space companies. They committed to end of 2024 reaching profitability, at least for that quarter, not for the year 2024, but like Q4 they think should be profitable. So and yeah, working on some next gen satellites and stuff like that. But it's one I still very much need to research further if I was to consider adding more shares.
Okay, cool. I mean, it's still impressive that because a lot of the space companies are just losing money. So the fact that they have profitability within, I mean, that's in 4 quarters. So that's pretty soon, I guess.
Yeah, 4 or 5. They have had to do some layoffs recently, and they're kind of committing to hit that profitability target, even if they need to cut back on, investing in the future or staffing and stuff like that. They really want to hit that date for profitability.
Cool. Okay, I want to skip Rocket Lab. That's the next company that the book covers, because we can take that last. There is a company called Firefly that the book covers, but it's not a publicly traded company as far as I know, and we cannot invest in. Yeah, so we can skip that one. And then
they are still interesting, by the way. They did just have their first successful launch of their Alpha rocket for U.S. government, so that will be a potential competitor to Rocket Lab's Electron in the near future. But yeah, definitely we can't really invest in it unless you're a accredited investor.
Yeah. I'm just curious, when you read the book, what did you think about you cannot call it founder, but this Max Polyakov, who was funding the...
He was an interesting character. I had come across him mentioned on very briefly on the internet, different tweets and stuff like that, but I didn't really know the whole backstory until I read the book. It does seem like he kind of got a little screwed over there. I felt bad for him. Really passionate about space, and he was able to kind of bring a lot of the heritage of the Ukrainian rocket technology over to the United States, and help fuel the new startup space industry with it. But eventually he kind of was forced out because he was Ukrainian. So
yeah, and I completely don't understand, because it seems like the US is in bed with Ukraine, and they somehow thought that he was Russian. And I mean,
I don't understand all the details of how that went down, but I know rocket technology is very obviously involved in security and stuff like that. Even SpaceX has had trouble hiring people who aren't American, because they have to make sure, obviously, if you can build a rocket, you can build a missile. So there's some concerns around it for sure.
Yeah. Just one interesting thing for the viewers who didn't read the book, that this guy basically spent $200 million, somewhere in that range, on this company. And then when they were trying to shoot the first rockets from Vandenberg Station, he was not allowed through security after many hours of checking, and he had to watch it from where everybody else, where the general public could watch the rocket launch from, and he was the reason why the whole company existed, and it was his rocket. So
it's rough.
And he was super pissed that if he would have invested that kind of money in any other country, he would have had the prime minister and the whole government giving him VIP treatment, and in the US he was treated as a US spy. So that was very, very rough.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, the next company, which was an interesting company, Astra Space Systems, or Astra, that it's called. And again, the book kind of paints the founders in not such a good light, I feel. They had quite a lot of launch failures. And I actually checked before this video. They are a publicly traded company. that has $30 million of cash on the balance sheet as of Q4. No, because I was just on their investor relation website, and you can't even find their quarterly reports. So I could only find the annual report. So at the end of 2022, they had $30 million on cash, in cash, and they were burning 200 something million in 2022. So that's like less than a quarter.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think they're going to make it. I do feel bad for obviously the employees and investors, because Astra stock really did take off for a while there, kind of like 2021 after they went public. There was a lot of hype around it, kind of almost like a meme stock type thing. CEO was making some pretty out there claims of what they would eventually accomplish. And, you know, investors who got really excited about it and kind of hopped in, some of them definitely really got hurt. You're talking like, I forget the peaks of the share price, but now we're probably like a $1.30 or something like that. And I'm sure it was like at least probably $20 per share, I would think.
Trying to see if I can put it on Astra.
But there are still some people who, you know, believe that they will turn things around. So obviously, you know, I hope they're successful for their sake.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And one question for me is how many, because I think you even mentioned it once, that there is, 200 rocket company startups, and there is like 3 that have managed to launch rockets into space, actually.
Yeah, I don't remember the 200 number off the top of my head, but yeah, definitely not very many have successfully launched. Astra did successfully get a launch off. They had about 7 attempts, I believe, and like 2 successes. So not like an amazing track record. And they eventually did fully cancel that rocket, which was a success. Gave up on it and decided to move on to a bigger rocket. But yeah, there's a lot of others still working on it. ABL is another name a lot of people haven't heard of. There's some European companies that are trying to, you know, grow the European space industry. I've heard RFA talked about a few times, but only a few have successfully ever launched. Yeah, that's the wild Astra chart for you.
And I think that this was reverse splitted because
they did have to do a reverse split to
15
regain
to 1. So this was like $10 where they IPO'd, and compared to that now it's $175.
Yeah,
and it was all the way to 320. That is crazy.
Yeah, definitely pretty rough. And you know, I think a lot of that is, I can understand CEOs want to go and kind of talk up their company. You know, it's kind of what they do. And if the stock price goes up, they can always raise more capital and they want to paint things in a rosy light. But Chris Kemp, some of the things he was saying just seemed like a little bit too out there, where it's like, okay, it's probably not fraud, but it's a little bit maybe disingenuous.
Yeah. So I agree with you. And that was also clear in the book that like the rocket would blow up 20 minutes into flight, and then he would call the investors and say like, we had a wonderful test flight and we learned so much. And it's like, I kind of understand why he's framing it that way, but maybe he was going like a bit too much overboard. Like,
very, very concerned with perceptions, I think. And he's also not really a rocket engineer. He's more of like a business person. So not as much involved in the technical side of things.
Yeah. And I think that he did contribute to some of the rocket failures, because it seemed like in the book he was like rushing certain things, and then he was being warned with certain risk, and he was ignoring it and still pushing for the flight, and
wanting to launch.
So can't blame him, but cool. And now we come to the best company, I think, of all, which is Rocket Lab. So this company, as far as I understand, is a major position for you.
Yeah, it's a definitely a large position in my portfolio.
Okay, cool. Could you give us a few minutes of elevator pitch and what this company does and why you are bullish about this company?
Sure. I mean, so there's a lot of ways of thinking about it, I suppose, but I guess what I could say for some people who are kind of just casually aware of the space industry is, well, let's take SpaceX, for example. They recently valued in the private equity markets, they raised more capital at $150 billion valuation. Rocket Lab currently valued, I think, around two, maybe two and a little bit right now. I don't always track the stock day to day, but so, how do you get from 2 to, it doesn't even have to be 150, obviously. Even if you go from 2 to 10 or 15, that's a great return depending on the time frame. So basically on the SpaceX, they developed a reusable rocket called Falcon 9. They developed their own satellite constellation, launched it all into orbit using this reusable rocket, and now they're going to be providing global internet connectivity via Starlink. So really an end-to-end space company. They do the launch, they do the manufacturing of their own satellites, they operate their satellites in orbit, and because of capturing the entire value chain from top to bottom, they've really ballooned their valuation. There is obviously
I have a
Starship.
question.
Yep.
I have a question. How much of the 150 billion is Starlink?
Oh, I would think a lot of it. If I had to, well, I would say 80 to 100. If that's my guess.
Yeah, I would guess the same.
Definitely. And Starlink is actually, from what I hear, just gone cash flow positive, which is obviously very big, and they're still expanding. But it's interestingly, the money usually is not really in launch for a lot of these space companies, but having the launch capability is very key to be able to do the rest on your own timetable, like affordably and all that. So it's a very important asset, even though the money might not be coming from launch. So bringing it back to Rocket Lab now, well, they're starting to work on their own reusable larger launch vehicle called Neutron. It has a lot of interesting innovations, and they're already building a lot of satellites. A lot of people don't know this. Actually, I didn't know it when I first looked into them. And by the way, when I did first start looking into them, I was pretty skeptical. I was like, well, SpaceX is already doing this stuff. Like, I think they've got a long way to go. But yeah, the more I learned about them, they made several important acquisitions to be able to really mass produce satellites, purchased a few different companies that can do like space-based solar, which not a lot of companies do. So they can do the solar panels for the satellites as well as reaction wheels for pointing them different places. They bought a different company for their software for managing all the satellites. Anyway, basically they've built out their capacity to build their own satellites, and they're very soon going to be able to launch reusably, which are kind of the two key pieces to then running your own satellite constellation profitably, which is where SpaceX is now. And Rocket Lab has said that they eventually do plan to own and operate their own assets in space. Right now, they're still building those satellites for others and launching for others, but that's where they want to get to eventually. So
if we go back to the SpaceX analogy, so when Rocket Lab finds out how they can monetize their own assets in space, that can potentially unlock tens, if not hundreds of billions of value.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying their constellation in space would be as large as Starlink, and they may not even be like an internet constellation. There's potential other applications out there, but that recurring revenue stream of getting paid monthly for your own satellites in orbit is much more attractive than building a satellite for someone, launching it once and being done with that satellite. Yeah. So there's a lot to be said for that. And, that's kind of where they said they do want to go. So when I first knew about the company, I thought, oh, it's just some niche launch provider. There's not really that much money in launch, which is kind of true, but it does unlock that whole other piece that's going to be very important for them.
Yeah, cool. I mean, what surprised me when I was looking into Rocket Lab is that the actual launch, because I think about them as a rocket company, but if you
Most
look
people
at
do.
yeah, and if you look at their revenue, it's 30 something percent is the launch business, and 60 something percent already today is the space services and making of satellites and yeah.
I mean, we do want to see launch continue to grow, and their current vehicle, Electron, they do need to continue to grow the cadence on that. And by the way, they are making that vehicle reusable as well, at least the first stage. So that'll help profitability on that side of things. But the space systems, it does bring in the majority of the revenue right now, partially fueled by some of those acquisitions. So I do expect, growth rate can't stay at like the 1,000 whatever percent it was for that 1 year. That was mostly because they made those acquisitions. But it's the space systems side of the business is extremely important and definitely underappreciated by most people.
Okay, good. And we both read this book that we keep talking about, and we know that Peter Beck, the CEO of Rocket Lab, is someone who doesn't like announcing, like Musk, who says like, in 20 years we're gonna live on Mars. It's more like this Peter guy is like quietly working on it, and then he would only announce it like, you see this rocket on the pad, it's going to go here, kind of.
It's very true. It makes it a little difficult at times because you don't always know what's coming. Like earlier this year, they basically unlocked a whole new market for their small rocket, which is like hypersonics. So that's testing like within the atmosphere. And nobody even knew this was coming when even projecting for it. He was just like one day, okay, we have a hypersonics launch next week. And I'm like, what? we're going into this whole new industry. So it's hard because they do play their cards very close to the chest, and they don't want to say, we're going to do this in 5 years. He's more like he wants it ready, and then like, oh, we're going to do this next year.
Do you think that it's to sort of like keep away the competition, like SpaceX? Because if he would announce like, we're going to do this, then Musk can just send like 15 times more engineers and we will beat you to it. I mean, I don't think Musk thinks about Rocket Lab when he goes to sleep, but
no, but there is a precedent for trying to stay off his radar. I don't know if you're familiar with OneWeb, another constellation, but basically the founder of OneWeb apparently kind of pitched this idea to Musk about internet constellations. And then the next thing he's building his own constellation. And Peter Beck did talk to Elon Musk and have a meeting talking about like smaller satellites that SpaceX wasn't really focused on. And then a little while later, SpaceX started offering rideshare missions for their Falcon 9, where they would launch these smaller spacecraft where he said previously they wouldn't. So I think, staying off his radar, there is something to be said for that. I don't know if that's the only reason Peter's like that. I think he also just wants to under promise, over deliver, and not like, promise things that don't happen. But yeah, that's also probably a side effect that's a perk.
Yeah. And we actually started touching on something that I really wanted to ask you, because, SpaceX is the 100-pound gorilla in this room. But when I was doing research, I don't feel like they are competitors, but they're not direct competitors. It's a little bit like SpaceX has the heavy duty rockets, and the main focus is going to Mars and developing the Starship. And the Electron rocket is a small satellite delivery. And the Falcon 9 is not really good to deliver your small satellite. I think maybe it was you who said in a video that it's like, maybe the semi truck is the cheapest per kilogram to deliver something, but you wouldn't want a semi truck to deliver your pizza. Like it's cheaper to deliver it on a.
Yeah, there has been that analogy before. There is some debate whether it's competition between these two vehicles or not, because Falcon 9 offers a few rideshare missions throughout the year where they just stuff it with a lot of small satellites. But the problem is those are only going to specific orbits and they're only launching at certain times. So it can be very hard to coordinate. So if you want to launch a satellite tomorrow that's, say, passing over Ukraine during the daytime from the hours of whatever, and you need that launched, like, rideshare is really not a very good option. And then you have a dedicated vehicle like Electron that is pretty much the only game in town right now for doing something like that.
Okay, cool. And then I wanted to touch on another subject, but it basically just slipped my mind. It's quite late here. And
sorry about that. The time difference is pretty huge.
Yeah, it's okay. This is usually when I film my videos, and there's very few European, stock market channels. So I normally collab with US people, and it's always at this time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was interested to see you were from Sweden, by the way. Do a lot of you guys out there invest in like American stock market companies, or?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, it's so funny because I saw somewhere that was it on X, when somebody asked like, why do you guys do what you do? And then it's because, when you have the investment bug, like you want to talk to your friends and family about investing, but usually those people don't. Yeah, like my wife wants to divorce me when I start talking about Rocket Lab, and then
there's only so much I can talk to my fiance about it either.
And then you need this platform where you can vent your enthusiasm, and then you meet all kinds of people from, for me, that's the beauty of X basically, or Twitter and YouTube, that you meet all these people. And I think, it's better to invest in the US stock market because you have the most expanding companies, the biggest liquid companies, and even the Swedish companies, like Spotify was a Swedish company, and they're being traded in the US. And
That's right.
Klarna is also a Swedish company, and they're private, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be listed in the US.
Okay. Yeah, I started out investing in Canadian companies, but after a couple of years, I felt very limited, and a lot of the exciting companies were in the United States, and that's I've gradually shifted more and more there. So I forgot about Spotify. So it was listed on the NYSE or NASDAQ?
One or the other.
One or the other.
Quickly Google it. I found it, but it doesn't say where it's listed.
Okay, that's all right.
It's definitely in the US. Yeah, how do I come back here? Okay, so back to Rocket Lab. So I read a book, Chris Myers. I keep forgetting the title of the book, but it's something like How You Find 100 Baggers on the stock market. I don't know if you have heard about that book.
I don't think I've read that one. No.
I actually kind of recommend it. It's because his point about the 100 baggers is that if you can catch a company that can grow 20-30% per year for a very, very long time, like 20-30 years, then like you will have 100 bagger basically. And his point was that most people cannot think that long, and they end up selling after 1 to 2 years. And he wrote this whole book about the investors that have had 100 baggers, like what was it that they looked for, and how they achieved it. And basically what is, just even in your numbers, that Rocket Lab is at 2 billion, SpaceX is at 150 billion. Like, almost, if Rocket Lab would grow to the size of SpaceX, that's already almost a 100 bagger there.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean that Rocket Lab is surpassing SpaceX either. Like, it could continue to grow, and the whole space industry is actually growing very rapidly right now. So
exactly,
the TAM continues to expand.
Exactly. So one of the things that was so intriguing to me about Rocket Lab is that in this book, Chris Myers talks about this concept of, everybody talks about the black swan event. And he's like, many times you have the white swan events that nobody talks about. And he said, like, for example, if you were to do a DCF on Amazon when it was just a bookstore, like there's no way that you can, like in any kind of DCF, you can get to the valuation of where Amazon is today. It's just Amazon had like a few white swan events that, they came up on AWS, and then the whole internet started running on AWS. And his point was that many times you don't, because you're holding companies for 10-20 years, like you don't know how much the company is going to change. And when I look at this Rocket Lab, I cannot help but see this company that has a super big runway, because space is a very, very growing industry, and it's quite literally limitless. Like where you can,
I mean,
it's the definition of limitless.
Yeah, I think so. I think it has a bright future ahead of it. I kind of talked in a video once where I thought like, okay, phase one is just getting Electron going, kind of proving that they can get to orbit, something hardly anyone has been able to do successfully. And then phase two is building out your capacity for manufacturing your own satellites and doing that sort of thing. Phase three, getting a larger rocket. And then beyond there, like once you're operating your own constellation, that's when the real money comes in, and who knows where they could go beyond that, really. They do have missions actually for NASA to like Mars. They have a planned mission to Venus. There's a lot of exciting stuff out there.
Yeah, definitely. So on Rocket Lab, it's like we're investing into Rocket Lab as a rocket launch company and as a space services company, but I can see that we're already in agreement that they're going to be like a constellation operating company, which is basically like, we cannot really put it into our DCFs because we don't know, we don't even know what it's going to be. But
I haven't put any of that in yet.
Yeah, but it's just funny that both you and me agree that it can unlock like a double, triple, quadruple in value compared to where the company is at today. And
sure, but I don't think they even need that, by the way, to double from here. Like as long as they, but that I think the future, it's a very long runway for continued growth.
Yeah, and what's also super intriguing about this company is that I really like opportunities where, as a retail investor, you can follow the company and get an edge on Wall Street. Because, if you watch channels like your channel, like none of the Wall Street guys are going to watch that. They're just going to look at like, okay, what was the quarterly report? Put it in my Excel table. Sure. Okay, go to the next company, right? And because we studied this company, we know that, for example, Peter Beck wouldn't announce that, okay, 5 years from now, we're going to do this constellation, and this is going to be the revenue, this is going to be the net margin, and, put this in your Excel sheets. He would be like, we have 20 satellites already, we tested them, and we are sending up another 200 with the approval. And then you basically miss it if you're not invested already now in the stock.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think so. You definitely, it's not one that a lot of, mainstream analysts look at very closely. So do you mind if I ask, do you currently have a position in Rocket Lab as well? Or?
No, I am trying to, as I said, I'm a real estate developer.
Right.
And the real estate business is not doing amazing currently on the planet. I think in Canada also you have I read
I mean, high interest rates definitely don't help, I don't think, for the markets, but yeah, it's not my field of expertise. So
yeah, it's yeah. So the real estate market is not doing amazing. So I haven't been able to liquidate some projects that I thought would be liquidated, and they can still be liquidated at any point. But the market is just not really good. So the moment I get cash freed, then Rocket Lab is going to be a major position for me. And I hope that the price is going to stay at this very discounted level and not go up.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting talking to people, and I've talked to a lot of other Rocket Lab bulls who keep like saying, "Oh, I hope it goes lower," and it's just funny. But yeah, they want to, obviously add at these levels or even in the threes. Is a really good deal, I think. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know how much lower the stock price can go, because we had this Electron failure, and I understand why the stock price dropped, but I don't understand why it dropped that heavily, because as we spoke about it, like 66% of the revenue is from space services already. Like,
yeah,
it's almost like the market thinks this is a rocket company, nothing else. And then
a lot of people do, but yeah, a little bit overdone maybe. I think we had kind of the back-to-back whammies of Peter Beck sold, I think, about $30 million worth of shares for himself, for his family, for charity reasons and stuff like that. And the market also reacted poorly to that, which, I mean, I felt like he can do whatever he wants with his shares if he wants to donate some to charity. As long as he keeps working hard on the company, I'm happy. And there's no signs he's not doing that. So, yeah, definitely. If we didn't have these two events, I don't think we would be in the fours right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why people freak out that after 20 years, it's almost been 20 years, I think, that he started Rocket Lab, that he takes some money off the table. And
yeah,
it's like, not,
I mean,
I think it's
put like decades of his life into this company. If he wants to take 3% off the table and make sure his family's taken care of, like, let's not panic here. But
more power to him. We have a question here. Do you see the comments on the screen?
Yeah, I think I do. If Neutron achieves better economics than Falcon 9, is SpaceX likely to leave? So yeah, this is interesting. The commenters asking if Neutron basically achieves better economies than Falcon 9, if SpaceX is going to leave that kind of class. And Elon has basically said previously that they're kind of all in on Starship right now, and they do eventually see stopping stopping Falcon 9. And only doing Starship, which is the largest rocket ever to fly. So it would be in a very different category, extremely heavy lift. So that could be down the line too. And if that does happen, Neutron would be one of the primary medium to heavier lift vehicles that isn't super heavy. There's a few others under development, but to me, Neutron looks like the safest bet for success.
Wouldn't it be comical that like you had the Falcon 1 that flew, and then they abandoned it, went to the Falcon 9, and the Falcon 1 opened basically the market for the Electron to come in, and then now they go to like Starship, and then they abandon the Falcon 9, and the Rocket Lab comes in, and it's like, okay, we have Neutron.
We'll take that too. Yeah. I never thought about it like that, but you're right. That would be pretty funny if that happened.
And okay, and wouldn't Starship be because if it's fully reusable, like the kilogram per like the price of kilogram to space would be extremely cheap on the Starship. But so what do you think about that as a competition for Rocket Lab?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real wild card. A lot of the cost of launching is not just that second stage of the vehicle. So I don't know, depending on how familiar they are with rockets, you have your first stage, which is like the bottom portion that pushes the vehicle up most of the way. And then the second stage is like this smaller piece that'll send it the rest of the way. So Starship will be fully reusable, whereas Neutron would expend that second stage. They are trying to make it as cheap as possible, but Starship is a massive vehicle. There's a lot of ground infrastructure. There's a lot of fueling that's needed, probably maintenance. It's a wild card to see how often they can launch. Would they bother launching a Starship with a payload that would go into a medium launch vehicle? Like that would be a massive rocket to launch a very small payload. So I think they've said they want to get the cost for launch like down to basically the propellant cost. But I'm sure there's other stuff that will go into play. But yeah, that would be the bear case of Rocket Lab, would be if you're extremely worried about Starship. But I do think, on the other hand, the industry can't have a monopoly of just one rocket and one company. Regulators
Yeah,
allow that to happen, and it shouldn't happen.
yeah, we forgot to touch on this. That's bear case, bull case. That was one of the things where I feel quite confident in investing in Rocket Lab. That we know that NASA has this strategy of, going to private companies, so privatize space, and to do it in a way that there is competition. So if they would feel that Rocket Lab is going under, I think that they would just make up contracts to give them, to make sure that there is competition in that
Probably,
space.
yeah, like NASA and some other government agencies, Space Force, Air Force, they've done a pretty good job of spreading around contracts to, not just SpaceX or ULA, given some to Rocket Lab. Blue Origin has really put their litigation to work in getting contracts too. And Relativity Space is another one that, anyway, they're all they're doing a pretty good job of spreading it around. They really want to seed a competitive industry, because they don't want to be, stuck with one launch vehicle, because in that case, SpaceX, if they're the only game in town, could jack the price up as much as they want.
Yeah. And what do you think about Blue Origin? I'm very curious about that. It's a company that we can't invest into.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
even know if we would
interesting.
want to invest into it, but
I don't think I would. I'm not crazy about the space tourism section, which is like their new Shepard vehicle, their suborbital vehicle. They also compete with Virgin Galactic on that. I'm not too crazy about that industry, but really the most focus of Blue Origin is on their lunar lander, and obviously their new Glenn launch vehicle, which is going to be another large rocket they're working on. They're very secretive, so it's hard to tell, how far along they are, what they're doing. But they do seem to be a bit slow and extremely expensive. They have like 11,000 employees, which is, a ton for a company that still hasn't gotten to actual orbit. So,
what? I didn't know they had 11,000 employees. In the book again, Ashley Vance book. What was it? Tom, the Firefly CEO, Tom Kusick.
I'm so bad with names. Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, so he worked at SpaceX. He worked at NASA, and then he was hired at Blue Origin, and he couldn't believe that it was like all about work-life balance, and he had emails about the company having yoga meetings and then going on to outings, and then he thought that at SpaceX he would be fired for even mentioning this idea, and he lasted like 6 days because he didn't think that this company was going anywhere. And
I mean, the good news for them is they have almost limitless money, because Jeff Bezos just keeps selling his Amazon shares to fund them. But the amount of money they're burning must be so massive, and they don't seem to have like a very cutthroat, like fast-paced culture, for sure, from what I've heard anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yes. So we wouldn't want to invest into that company. Well,
yeah, I mean, I don't think so. Again, New Glenn could be an interesting vehicle in the future. There's been talk that they could shoot for full reusability as well, so we'll have to see on that one. But
yeah, it's crazy that it took SpaceX like to get Falcon 9 reusable. It was like 6 years after the Falcon 9 was flying. Maybe I don't, but it was many years.
Sounds in the right ballpark.
Yeah. So it's like, I would think that to even fly the New Glenn, it's like a few years, and then you wouldn't try to make it reusable like straight away, and then
I mean, I'd love to see some hop tests or something, but it's like a black box over there. You never know what's going on. But then I wonder if one day they're just going to be like, okay, we're ready to launch, and then everyone's like, what? Anyway, I didn't know
Yeah,
if you were really.
but there is one very bad red flag in my opinion, is that Amazon had, like, they were competing with SpaceX on the, Starlink and the Coupier
Mhm.
constellation system.
Yeah.
And the most logical thing was that I think Amazon even contracted Blue Origin to fly all the satellites, and they got the permits from the FAA.
Not
And
all, but a portion of them. Yeah.
yeah, but I think it was changed now, because in the FAA approval, don't quote me on these numbers, but it was something like they can shoot up 4,000 satellites, but 2,000 has to be done by 2026, something like this.
Yeah, they need to
And
get half their satellites up within, yeah, something like 3-4 years, which is really tough. And they did.
it's very tough on the Blue Origin rockets.
Yeah. Well, they paid for 3 different rockets. Probably biggest one was the Blue Origin vehicle, but then they also did Ariane 6 and ULA, their Vulcan. And the interesting thing is none of these rockets are actually flying right now, and they keep getting delayed. And Amazon has this deadline that's coming fast. So some Amazon shareholders, a pension fund, actually sued Amazon's board, and I think Jeff Bezos saying, like, SpaceX is right here. You guys
Yeah.
won't launch with them just because Jeff doesn't like them, and also he's got a competing company. But like, you have to do the. I actually still own a couple $1,000s of Amazon shares from like a long time ago, and like as an Amazon shareholder, I'd be like, this is ridiculous. Like, so we've got this deadline approaching. We have the cheapest
Yeah,
ride that's available, and you
and
won't
also
launch it
that
because.
Starlink can suck up all the market, right? Like
Yeah, I
they
mean,
can get a total monopoly by the time you launch your own satellite
timing's
system.
important too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So, but also Falcon 9 would probably be cheaper. Anyway, they paid
yeah,
10 billion for launch, to put it in perspective. And obviously Rocket Lab's like worth 2 billion. So Amazon could buy Rocket Lab 5 times for the amount of money they're paying to launch their Kuiper constellation. Not even build those satellites, just launch them.
that is crazy. That is crazy. Okay, and other than these, are there any other space companies that you think is interesting to look at?
So I've been looking at one called MDA lately. It's a bit more conservative. They're more on the building out satellites, and they built the Canada arm on the International Space Station. I don't know if you're familiar at all with that.
Is it the arm that catches and docks?
Yeah, it catches and grabs like vehicles coming to dock, and also it's used for different things. But yeah, they've been doing pretty well. They're already profitable, which is nice, because every time I look at a space company, I'm always looking at how long till they go bankrupt if they don't get profitable, or what's their burn rate. And this one was like, whoa, they're already making money, which was nice. Haven't bought any of those shares, but that's an interesting one. Relativity is kind of interesting. They're not publicly traded, but they're big on 3D printing, and made some pretty like outrageous claims themselves about what their future rockets are going to do. They actually had to walk back some of those claims because I guess they just realized they couldn't do it. But
what were their claims? I'm not familiar with this company.
so they basically said they were also going to have a fully reusable vehicle like Starship. It was going to be smaller than Starship. They were going to 3D print the entire thing, which frankly, to me at least, doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, some components make a lot of sense to 3D print, but when you're talking like the body, which is like giant tanks, like 3D printing takes forever, and it leaves all these bumps and stuff. So I don't think it's most logical for that. And they eventually did say, okay, we're not going to 3D print certain portions of the rocket anymore, and kind of pushed back. But yeah, they kind of pulled a SpaceX. Their first smaller rocket, they launched it. It was pretty successful. Didn't quite get to the finish line, but then immediately after that, they canceled it and said they're going to focus on a bigger rocket now. So they're still 2026 is probably when they're 2027, I think, when their bigger rocket they want to launch.
And this is not a publicly traded company.
No, they're just kind of an interesting case study and the technology and stuff like that. But I think they're also one that like has made very big claims that I would be a little skeptical of in some cases.
What were those claims?
Oh, just the full reusability with the size of the vehicle. Like, to be fully reusable, for it to make sense, you have to go really big. That's kind of like why Starship did, and somehow they were going to have a vehicle like a lot smaller than the Starship and also be fully reusable. And just anyway, there's a bunch of things, and then they kind of made their rocket a little bit more modest, perhaps, that they're shooting for. So
cool. We got a comment here.
yeah, I heard him talking about Rocket Lab. I don't know if you're familiar with the All In podcast.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so they had their summit, and apparently this guy was there talking about Rocket Lab recently. I didn't actually see what he had to say, but apparently he's a pretty big investor from before they went public, even. But yeah, I definitely want to go back and listen to what he had to say about it for sure.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually going to write it up. Maybe it's a coming video. We can talk about it. Cool, Dave. I think it's getting a bit late here.
Sure.
I really enjoyed this talk.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, maybe we can do it again sometime.
For sure. Yeah, you can come on my channel if you want sometime.
Yeah, sure. It would be awesome. Cool. So any closing words about people who are new to space investing?
Well, look, I always do want to, give the warning. I think the space industry in general is fairly risky, and there are a lot of kind of landmines out there that I would be scared of. So I wouldn't just say just because the space industry is growing, like every space company is a huge buy. You have to be very careful. And Rocket Lab, I'm very bullish on it. I'm still, being aware that it's still a risky bet, but I am very bullish on it. But I just want to put that out there. So if you're trying to play it safe, I'm not saying that was definitely for you.
Cool. Always look for the burn rate. When you look at space companies, it's like, check the balance sheet. How much cash do they have? How much did they burn in the last
For sure, it's very important. Yeah. That's one of the first things that drew me to Rocket Lab. I was like, wow, they have so much more money than I realized. So
yeah. And then we got the last question here. How worried should we be about the failed recent launch by Rocket Lab?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little disappointing. The numbers are going to be a bit worse for this year. I feel pretty confident that they're going to get it figured out and get back to launching. Maybe it'll even mean that there's more launches next year, because they do have a pretty considerable backlog for launches that's actually been growing rapidly lately. They've signed a lot of big deals for Electron, which I was pretty happy with. So those will probably get delayed as opposed to canceled. And maybe we'll see more launches than we would have otherwise next year, but it will hit the income for this year. And we just have to hope they figure out the issue soon.
By the way, when they figure out the issue, do you know if they're going to tweet it or just leave it on the website, or how can we? I was actually wondering.
It'll probably be on their website. I think they do have to file some kind of paperwork before they can return to flight, before they're allowed to, basically saying what the issue was and how they resolved it. That's pretty standard for any rocket that has had a failure. So we should find out what happened.
Okay, cool. So thank you so much, Dave. Have a good rest of the day, and
no problem. You too. Hope I didn't keep you up too late with the time difference.
No. It was all worth it. So
okay.
Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.